Okay guys, today we're going to be doing the arithmetic sample questions from the AccuPlacer. So you have this big packet in front of you and you're not going to take it home because I don't want you to lose it. I don't want to print another copy of it. You're literally going to leave it in the classroom. So at the top of the sheet, if you just want to read along with me, we'll talk about what is on this part of the test. This is like the lowest part of the test in the 3 sections. So this one's called the arithmetic. There's 17 questions on the arithmetic test. And it's divided into the content areas that are listed below. And you cannot use a calculator on any part of these questions, which sucks, but you're going to have to learn how to do all this by hand again. Okay, so there's operations with whole numbers and fractions, including addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, recognizing equivalent fractions, mixed numbers, and estimating. Okay, some of the questions are on here are actually harder than the questions that are on the AccuPlacer, but we're just trying to get you to remember how to do all the different type of things that you could see on the AccuPlacer. So the next one's operations with decimals and percents, including addition, subtraction, multiplication, division with decimals, percent problems, recognition of decimals, percent equivalents, and estimating. And then you could also see problems where you're doing applications and problem solving, including rate, percent, and measurement problems, and simple geometry problems and distribution of a quantity into its fractional parts. So you'll see a ton of these problems so you can get some good examples. Well, let me go to the next page. There we go. Okay, so for each of these you solve without using a calculator. If you have a calculator, put it on the ground. If you have your phone, don't use it. Don't use it. Don't use it. Okay, so we're going to start with fractions. And remember that when you add and subtract fractions, you have to have a common denominator. So I'm going to write that off to the side. You have to have a common denominator when you're adding and subtracting. So we're going to do number 2 together. You're going to write this down with me, so that way you have some sample problems to look at. Okay, so on this one, you've got 4/5 minus 1/10. So you need to get a common denominator. You want to see if there's a number you can multiply the first fraction by so that these would be the same. So if this one's 5 and this one's 10, I can multiply this one by 2, which would make the denominators 2 or 10 on both of them. So I'm going to write times 2, and you have to multiply the top and the bottom by 2. So that would be 8 over 10. Minus, and I'm going to keep the 1/10. Now that you have the common denominator, same denominator, you keep the 10 and you subtract the top. So 8 minus 1, you go left to right, is 7. You have to reduce. If you cannot reduce, then that's your final answer. So your answer is 7/10. See? We didn't need a calculator. You're fine. Okay? So I'm not going to do number 4. You guys can fill in the rest of them because you guys can find a common denominator. Sometimes you may get some really big fractions, and then you'll just have to reduce them at the end, but just don't forget to reduce. So I'm going to skip down to number 6. These are called mixed numbers. Remember that a improper fraction is something like this, where it's 22 over 5. It's bigger on top and smaller on bottom. A mixed number is when you have a whole number and a fraction. So mixed, improper. Okay, so on number 6, in order to add these, you have to have a common denominator, but you have to have them written as improper fractions before you can add a fraction. So if you're trying to figure out this, there's like this check mark method you guys learned in elementary school. But really what you do is you do 4 times 5, and then you add the numerator. So 5 times 4 is 20, plus the 3 on top is 23. Keep the denominator 4. Then over here, you do 3 times 3, plus the number on top, so 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11, so I have plus 11 over 3. Okay, so now that I have them as improper fractions, I want to get a common denominator. The easiest way to do it is to multiply by the opposite denominators, but sometimes you'll get a really big denominator, which is okay. So to get a common denominator, I'd multiply this one by 3, top and bottom, and this one by 4, top and bottom. So this is where you're going to have to remember how to multiply. You don't know what 23 times 3 is. You take 23 times 3 off to the side. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 2 is 6. And you get 69 over 12. Plus, on the right hand side, 11 times 4 is 44 over 12. Then you have to add these numbers together. And you're like, oh my gosh, how do I do this without a calculator? Well, you're going to write 69 plus 44. Write them on top of each other. You start on the right hand side and work your way left. So 9 plus 4 is 13. Write down the 3, carry the 1. 1 plus 6 plus 4. Well, 4 plus 6 is 10, plus 1 is 11. So I have 113 out of 12. Okay, So I don't know in the AccuPlacer, I've never seen it. I don't know if they leave it as an improper fraction or a mixed number, but you probably should get some practice with it. So then you have to go, how many times does 12 go into 113? And if you're like, I have no idea, Miss Clark, that is insane, you just are going to do some guessing and check it. So I'm going to go off to the side and do 12 times, I don't know, maybe I'll try 10, okay? So I do 0 times 2, which is 0, 0 times 1, which is 0. Then I have to have my placeholder when you're multiplying. 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 1 is 1. Add straight down, 0, 2, 1. So 120, so that's too big. I'm going to do 12 times 9, which is 9 times 2, which is 8. Carry the 1. 9 times 1 is 9 plus 1 is 108. So it goes in 9 full times. 113 minus the 108 is 5/12. Okay. So right now you're thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this all by hand? Well, you can use these over here, and because your answer choices are all going to be multiple choice, so you could check this with your improper fraction on the actual AccuPlacer. So if you want to leave them as improper fractions, change them later, that's totally cool. It's up to you. Okay? So that's kind of the little fraction area when you're adding and subtracting. The next section has more adding and subtracting. On this one over here on number 7, you're just going to have to do all 3 of them and then get a common denominator for all 3, which is totally fine. I'm not going to do this one, but look at this. They already have a common denominator. How cool! So when you make the improper fractions, you just subtract the numerator and go from there. So maybe I'll do a crazy one. Maybe I will do this one. So on number 10, you multiply 5 times 12, and then you add the number on top. So 12 times 5 is 60 plus 1 is 61. Keep the denominator of 12. Basically, the 5 gets incorporated in the top of the numerator. 2 times 4 is 8 plus the 1 is 9. So minus 9 over 2. To get a common denominator, I don't need to multiply this one by 2 and this one by 12 because I'm going to get really big numbers. So actually, I could just multiply this one by 6, top and bottom. And that would make a common denominator. So 61 over 12 minus 6 times 9 is 54 over 12. And then 61 minus 54, if you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do that, right off to the side. 4 can't be taken away from 1. You're going to have to borrow. So borrow 1 from the 6. That changes to a 5. That changes that to 11 minus 4, which is 7. So it's 7/12, which is a normal fraction that's already reduced. So that's your answer. Okay, so we've added and subtracted some fractions and some mixed numbers. Now let's multiply and divide, because why not? So these are kind of fun. I like multiplying and dividing. You do not need a common denominator. So, alright, no common denominator. You just gotta get to multiply. Okay, so we've done this a long time ago with x's, and we did rationals, which you have no idea what I'm talking about, and that's cool. When you're multiplying, you can multiply straight across, or you can try to do what's called cross-simplifying. So you can look and see if a number on top and bottom, either diagonal or off top and bottom, will reduce. So like the 5 and the 10, those both can be divided by 5, so I would reduce this to 1, divide the 10 by 5, and get 2. 4 and 16 are both divisible by 4, so it's turned into 1, and this would turn into a 4. Then you would multiply your numbers. 1 times 2 is 2, and 1 times 4 is 4, which is not reduced. So you divide by 2, and you get a half, and that's your final answer. You actually could have reduced these back here as well, but either way is just fine. The next one, again, you cannot multiply mixed numbers. You have to do improper fractions. So we're going to switch them again. So I'm going to do 4 times 3 plus 1. So 4 times 3 is 12, plus 1 is 13 over 4. Times, shouldn't be using x's, they should be using dots, but that's not your problem. 5 times 3 is 15, plus the 2 on the top is 17 over 3. And now, you don't need a common denominator, you just need to see if anything cross-simplifies. Could I reduce the 4 and the 17? Nope. Could I reduce the 13 and 3? Nope. Can't reduce these, can't reduce these. This is when you start crying. Or you just do your math. So on the bottom, 4 times 3 is 12. 13 times 17 is going to be a large number. I'm going to have to go off to the side and figure it out. So 13 times 17. 7 times 3 is 21. I put the 1 down. The 2 gets carried over to the side. I do 7 times 1, which is 7, plus the 2 is 9. Then when you're multiplying and you have a 10 spot, you always put like a placeholder and put a 0 there. 1 times, and we've already used this, 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 1 is 1. Add straight down. 0 plus 1 is 1. 9 plus 3 is 12. So I get 221 over 12. Then you can figure out how many times is 12 going to 221 and try to do the mixed number. You can leave it like this. I'm totally fine with this. But if you wanted to, you could. And if you do it, 12 goes into 221 18 times, which is a lot, with 5 12ths left over. Okay? So you can do either way. I'm fine with that. So dividing is fun. I love dividing. So I need to make this one a fraction. So I have 5/9 divided by 9 over 1. So I kind of told you guys about drop, switch, flip, but when I did it, what I do is I drop the first fraction, I write 5/9. I change this to multiplication, and then flip the second fraction. So it's called drop, switch, flip. Okay, that's the way I learned it. You cannot do a division problem. You have to switch it to a multiplication problem. The proper way to talk about it is to multiply by the reciprocal. So nothing can cross simplify. The 9's cannot simplify because they're both in the denominator. If one was on top and one was on bottom, they would simplify. They cannot simplify back here because you cannot cross simplify with dividing, only with multiplying. So since nothing reduces, I just multiply the top, which would be 5 times 1, which is 5, and 9 times 9 is 81. And that's not reducible, so that's your final answer. Okay, so on 18, again, you're just going to have to change these into improper fractions. Then you'll have to flip the second fraction, and some things are going to reduce on that one. So you're going to like that a lot. So like here, if you did 2 times 7, you get 14. Plus 3 is 17 over 7, divided by 17 over 21. Drop, switch, flip, or multiply by reciprocal, you get 17 over 7. Switch that to multiplication. Flip that second fraction, you get 21 over 17. Now you can cross simplify. 7 and 21 are both divisible by 7. So that would be a 1. This will turn into a 3 because 21 divided by 7 is 3. And the 17s are going to reduce to 1s. So you have 3 times 1, which is 3. And 1 times 1, which is 1. So you can put it as 3 over 1. But I am totally fine with you leaving it as 3. So that's just fractions, guys. So let's go on to decimals, because why not? So I probably, if it were me, you could have this up, pause the video, and then you could practice all those, and then he can show you the next part of the video. Okay? So the next one is decimals. Ooh, so we're going to work on number 20. So we've got 8.01 plus this. When you're adding decimals, all you have to do is line up your decimals. So 6.7. You have a blank space right here. You can put a 0 if it makes you feel better, but you don't need to write anything. 9.45. And you literally just add straight down. So 1 plus 0 plus 5 is 6. 0 plus 7 plus 4 is 11. I write the 1, carry the 1, and then I add straight down. 1 plus 8 plus 6 plus 9. Okay, so these are gross numbers to add. I'd probably start with 1 plus 8, which is 9. And then for me, I would go down here and I'd add the 9 and get 18. Then I'd add the 6 and I get 24. If you need to use your fingers, no judgment. Who cares? This decimal just comes straight down and your answer is 24.16. And that's your answer for number 20. For 22, when you subtract, it's 17.49 minus 10.2. Make sure your decimals match up. You put a 0 here. You subtract straight down, and that's your answer. So 9 minus 0 is 9. 4 minus 2 is 2. Keep the decimal. 17 minus 10 is 7. And that's your final answer. Those should be pretty simple. So in the next video, I'll tell you how to multiply them and divide them. So, next video.